Of all the weapons used by terrorists, the hardest for us to understand may be suicide bombers. They are typically young men in the prime of life. How are they persuaded to destroy themselves and others? The answer may lie in a culture that rewards their sacrifice with honor and respect. ABC's John Quinones recently traveled to a village that was home to a suicide bomber. Here is some of his report from Primetime Thursday.
We approach this town riding in an armored vehicle. The mood is tense. There are tanks in the streets. But it's not just the fighting that brings us here. We've come because we've heard of a local hero. He's a legend here, and his name is Saeed Hotori.
How many of you consider Saeed to be a hero? Everybody, huh?
The children especially idolize him.
This is Saeed?
Hosni is 9 years old.
What do you think about what he did?
It's good, and when I grow up, I want to be just like him.
He's not a rock star, not a famous athlete, or a movie star. What makes Hotori famous is what he did on the last night of his life. It's June 1st, and Saeed Hotori hires a taxi for the half-hour ride to Tel Aviv and its bustling nightlife. He asks his driver to drop him off several blocks away from one of the most popular discos by the sea. Hotori stands in line at the entrance to the disco. He seems to fit in, part of the crowd. But what no one knows is that this young man is a human bomb, strapped to his chest, a powerful stash of explosives. At 11:26 that night, he triggers the bomb. Within seconds, Hotori and 21 others, mostly young girls, lay dead or dying on the street.
Suicide attacks against innocent civilians. It is something that we in America had never encountered until, of course, the tragic events of September 11th.
Now, of course, we relate all too well to the vicious cycle of violence here. 7 suicide bombings in the last 10 days, and the Israeli retaliation. What is it that would drive anyone to commit such a horrendous act, at the same time killing himself? To find out, we head to the town of Qalqilia, where suicide bomber Hotori is celebrated as a hero. As soon as we arrive here, residents invite us on a tour, pointing to the tanks in the streets and the bullet holes in their homes. They blame the Israelis and the Americans who support them. What would you do if this was your home? This man asks. It's a kind of helplessness that people here say gives birth to the suicide bomber, who they revere as a martyr. Dr. Iyad Sarraj is a Palestinian psychiatrist and one of the world's foremost experts on suicide bombers.
The identification with his people tells him that out of this misery, out of this despair, you have to act.
Dr. Gerald Post of George Washington University recently completed a project interviewing 35 imprisoned Palestinian terrorists. Suicide bombers, he says, are trained to dehumanize their victims.
There's an interesting psychological law that is created by these individuals who can be very warm, loving, family individuals, and at the same time kill with not a quiver.
Hotori, for example, was described as devoutly religious, quiet, ordinary. Here he is at a wedding, just 5 hours before he turned himself into a human bomb. It's hard to imagine that such a seemingly sensitive young man could be recruited by a terrorist organization and turned into a suicidal killer. But Dr. Sarraj says it doesn't take much recruiting at all.
In many cases, the potential martyr is not somebody you recruit to do the job.
They will come to you.
They will come.
In fact, often, for the families of the bombers, these attacks are an honor. This is Saeed Hotori's father.
You have said you're jealous of your son and the way he died.
Yes, I have said that, and I'm saying it again.
And he's not the only one who feels that way. After Hotori killed himself and 21 others, his father was congratulated by his community.
Any other father would be distraught, would be in mourning over the tragic loss of his son. But you are not?
This kind of death is better than any other kind of death, thanks to God.
A better death because suicide bombers are told that as martyrs, they will be awarded a special place in heaven, the highest level of paradise.
There are other incentives. We are told that often terrorist organizations promise to give money to the families of suicide bombers.
Hoturi, like most suicide bombers, never told his family what he planned to do. But many, like this man, who killed himself and 15 others last weekend, do record their farewell, something the experts call an emotional point of no return.
It is a declaration. I'm going to do it. I'm committed, and everybody is watching.
After recording his message, this man drove this truck loaded with explosives. Which brings us back to 9-year-old Hosni, that Palestinian boy I met in the town of Qalqilia. It turns out he's the cousin of Saeed Hoturi, the suicide bomber.
I want to join an operation attack just like Saeed.
Are you joking? Or are you telling me the truth?
I'm saying the truth.
What would you say to Americans watching this who don't understand why you feel the way you do?
We are living in fear. The Americans are giving the Israelis tanks. They are shelling our houses every day.
For every one of these young men who commits this horrendous act, how many do you think are waiting to try the same thing?
Many. Many. And by the day, they increase.